Hey, what's going on, everyone? I figured I would come back with another video here after some feedback from some of the people that watched the Fred Warner one that just kind of said that it was a little bit easier to follow along with some of the numbers with the stuff in front of them. So today I thought it would be a pretty good time to talk about salary offsets and rookie contracts as it pertains right now to the New York Jets and Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is the lone draft pick who is not signed. According to Pro Football Talk, the holdup is really because of two things. The first thing deals with a bonus payout schedule, and the second one deals with offsets. Offsets, I think, is the one that causes more confusion and really gets talked about much more. So I thought I'd explain it here and why this is just, it's just such a bad look for the Jets. It's just such a bad job from the Jets. This is supposed to be the new Jets. Right, you've got this new, young, fiery head coach, the guy that's going to take you back from being a dormant franchise for the last decade and make you into something special. And he's going to make you into something special along with this kid at quarterback that you drafted who is going to finally be the one to be the heir to Namath after all the guys who have been drafted by the Jets and not worked out. The Ken O'Briens, the Browning Nagels, all those guys, Chad Pennington, Mark Sanchez, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, all of these guys. This is supposed to be the guy. And instead of having him there day one of practice, he's still holding out because of a contract. Crazy. So anyway, so just real quick on the bonus payout schedule. This is probably what Zach Wilson's contract will look like when it is actually signed. Might be a couple things that are a couple dollars off here and there from my estimates, but this is probably what the contract will look like. So he's going to receive a signing bonus of about $22.9 million. And even though we consider these, and when we talk about them, it makes it sound as if the signing bonus is all paid out at once. They're not. They're typically paid out over a certain period of time. You might get 25% within 2 weeks of signing. You'll get 25% another couple weeks later. Then maybe you get the remaining 50% on, the last day of the league year, day before free agency. So that would be like March 16th or so of 2022. So there's a business case that you can make for both sides as to why more money being paid out up front is important. Or in the case of the team, why holding it back so you can gain some interest on it, that's all beneficial. So I can understand that. The problem for the Jets in that regard is twofold. Number one, the player that's picked in front of Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, got his signing bonus paid completely right after signing. It's about 2 weeks later. Trey Lance, who was just signed today by the San Francisco 49ers, got his entire bonus paid out within 2 weeks of signing. And the second issue is that the Jets years ago did a contract for Sam Darnold where his entire signing bonus was paid out 2 weeks, within 2 weeks of signing. So it's very hard for the Jets in that regard, I think, to say, no, we're not going to pay your signing bonus all up front. Now, that can be a negotiating tactic. But that's a hard one to argue, where they're kind of arguing that the Darnold contract doesn't count because the precedent is invalid because that was a different general manager and a different person negotiating the contract. And I'm not going to say that there's no legitimacy to that argument, but it's kind of limited only because the quarterbacks around him have that same thing. And the other thing is that the Jets, when it comes to the offset clauses, are also kind of crying about precedent. And the precedent there, which is saying, is they don't do what's called the no offset condition in a contract. All their contracts have what are called salary offsets. You can't argue that the precedent exists for you in the past, and then for the signing bonus say, well, that past precedent doesn't count. So your new front office, you can do things however you want. So I think in that regard, you can't make the same argument for both. You can't say precedent on one but not precedent on the other. So anyway, that part I think is a little less important. The other one deals with the salary offset. So what exactly is the salary offset? So if you look at the contract here, here's what you have to know. His contract is going to be worth about $35.15 million. All right, that's a given. There's nothing to negotiate. It is what it is. the total guarantee on the contract is going to be $35.15 million. The entire contract is going to be 100% fully guaranteed. So the argument where you get into play on the offset is basically what happens if a player is released from his contract. All right. It doesn't mean that a player is traded. Players traded, offsets vanish. Okay. Well, what happens if a player, gets suspended? He's like a really bad person or whatever. He lands in jail. All his guarantees void. Offsets don't matter. The offset covers a team in the event that a player is released with guaranteed salary on the books and he has the opportunity to play for another team. If he has an opportunity to play for another team, the Jets or whatever team would be entitled to recover that money. Up to whatever the guarantee level is. So that's really the heart of the issue. And people mistakenly, I think, will think that you're talking about an offset of $35.15 million. And the answer to that is no. You're not talking about an offset of $35.15 million. This signing bonus, all right, is not subject to anything that has to do with an offset. There's forfeiture related to a signing bonus that has to do with basically getting suspended. So this is out, okay? And we know for a fact he's not getting cut this year, right? We know that. So let's just take this whole year out of the equation. Let's just mark this as red. So this offset has no meaning because he's going to earn 67% of his contract this year, and he's certainly not getting cut this year. So the offset means nothing. Now we look at year 2, okay? He's going to make $2.25 million in cash. He'll have a $7.99 million salary cap charge. If the Jets cut him, their salary cap charge will be $28.76 million. That's regardless of any offset. This is the salary cap charge. They can get a credit later on, but that's it. Do you really think the Jets are going to cut him next year? I mean, how bad would he have to be to get cut? There's no way, right? Because Josh Rosen is probably the worst quarterback to ever play a rookie year. The Cardinals traded him for a second-round pick. So, obviously, offsets, they don't come into play here. So, let's make that red, too. Year 3. Hey, Sam Darnold made it to year 3. Most quarterbacks make it to year 3. So, our offsets don't make a difference here either. So, these 3 years, no matter what these numbers are, the offset doesn't matter, whether he has an offset or doesn't have an offset. It's about 85% of the entire contract, and it makes no difference whether there is or is not an offset. Now you move into the 4th year. So the 4th year is where there's potential that you could move on from a quarterback. We see that often, that the players will bench quarterback, they move a quarterback, like we traded Darnold this year, right? So you might look at that and you'll say, okay, what do we have at stake here? What we have at stake here is about $5.45 million. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty reasonable number. Now, you have to think about this not from the legal standpoint, which is what the Jets are worried about with the precedent factor. You don't even have to think about it just from a salary cap standpoint of just thinking, well, we can get $5.45 million back. Let's think of it from a realistic standpoint. If this kid is so bad that you can't trade him in year 4. The Jets just traded Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was god-awful for the last 2 years. They not only traded him to Carolina, Carolina picked up an option on a 5th year for $18 million for the kid. So you have to say that he's going to be so bad that you can't find a trade partner. So if you owe him $5.45 million and a team that's decided, okay, well, we didn't want to trade for him, but we'll sign him, sees that, and they see that there's offsets on the salary, meaning whatever salary they pay to Zach Wilson up to $5.45 million is going to get paid back to the Jets What do you think they're going to offer Zach Wilson to play in 2024? Do you think they're going to offer him more than $5.45 million? Obviously not. They're going to pay him the bare minimum that is possible to pay him to be a player in the NFL. That number is $1.055 million. That's the minimum salary for a player in his fourth year of his career in the NFL in 2024. So all of this is all out. This is the only part of the contract that the offset matters for. This goes for both sides that are dug in on this. This is all that's at stake. Now, this $1.05 million means more to the player than it does to the team, right? So this number is, let's just see this. It is how much of a percentage of the entire contract? Wow, that's huge. Good job, Jets. So the Jets are holding firm of not having their quarterback in training camp right now for 3% of the entire contract. How much is the Jets' payroll this year? Probably about $180 million. So let's see what that is. Let's see. This divided by 180. Oh, wow. That's huge. About 0.586% of their payroll. That's what the Jets are haggling over. I'll get to more in a minute here. But just think of how ridiculous this is. You're a $1 billion company, $1 billion franchise. You're worth billions of dollars. Owner's rich. And this is what you're worried about. 3% of this kid's contract and about 0.6% of your entire payroll this year. And instead of saying, you know what, we want to get off to a fresh start. You know, what is important? What's going to make the most money for our organization? It's going to make the most money for the team is having this kid prepared on the field and playing football. You know what's not in the best interest of the Jets right now? To sign Josh Johnson because they don't have another quarterback on the roster. The Jets went all in on this kid. Zach Wilson was going to be the starter from day one. They traded away Sam Darnold to get rid of any type of competition that would come from that. They didn't bother going and signing a Joe Flacco type to keep the seat warm or anything like that. They just have some guys that are later draft picks that are on the team that are only ever going to come in an emergency, which means that Wilson was going to get hurt. And if Wilson got hurt, they would go and sign a veteran, probably like a Josh Johnson, to play. To have a Josh Johnson come in and be the potential starter for the Jets right now because you can't get a contract done because of $1 million in 2024 is absurd. That is absolutely crazy. You know, just pull back for a minute. Think about reality. Think about it even just from a business standpoint. $1 million means nothing to you. Having this kid on the field and getting him prepared to play with the team means everything. The Jets' whole plan this year is to see how all these new faces fit with this quarterback. They have a lot of salary cap space next year. It's to evaluate the way things go. So next year, they can go in there. They can get the players that they need to work with him and work with the coach so they can be successful in 2022, 2023, and 2024. So you're arguing over this. You will probably have two players in training camp who have salaries of a little over $400,000 that get hurt. And you'll end up paying those two players about $800,000 combined. And you will have no desire to have those players on your team. But it was dumb luck that they got injured in the preseason. And that's what you're worried about here. It's the same cost. That's what you're worried about. That is insanity. That's what that is. And this goes for his side too. If they're not looking to play ball, it goes to them as well, because there are some compromises here that teams have come up with in the past. And the basic compromise would be to do the offsets on basically partial offsets. So what that means is that they'll look at these paragraph 5 salaries. That's the minimum that a player can play on. And they'll say, okay, from a realistic standpoint, if we cut him at any point in time during this, we know he's only going to earn the minimum from another team, right? That's what I explained before. So they'll say, you know what? We want offsets on this, but all of this other stuff, no offset on that. So you can get the no offset clause on this. We'll pay you the roster bonus, and you don't have to pay back anything on those. And that's kind of been the compromise in a couple of spots. So I would anticipate that that's what will happen, but it's what should have happened 2 weeks ago. And this is where, again, you get more into these things where you just get into the logic of it. So I pulled up the quarterbacks who are all drafted in the top 10 who have had a contract outcome. Let's take a look. Cam Newton extended. Andrew Luck extended. Jameis Winston expired. Jared Goff extended. RG3 was terminated in his option year. Marcus Mariota expired. Carson Wentz extended. Trubisky expired. Bortles extended. Darnold traded. Locker expired. Tannehill extended. Blaine Gabbert expired. Patrick Mahomes extended. And Josh Rosen was traded. So you look at these deals. Did the offset come into play? No. So your quarterbacks, no quarterback drafted in the top 10 has had a situation where an offset would have made a difference. Okay, what about the other players? Let's just look at the top 10 picks. So here's a list of all the players. Okay. Who had an offset benefit that mattered? One player, Eric Flowers. He was cut by the Giants in the 4th year, and I think he signed with the Washington football team. So we're looking at 1.4% of the entire population of players. Nobody else did. Now, you had a couple players who were terminated, had their contract terminated. Let's just pull up those. So RG3 was in his option year. You had Leonard Floyd and Eric Ebron in their option year. Sorry, there was one other I needed to do here. And you had Deion Jordan and Leonard Fournette who had voided their guarantees for conduct. So offsets didn't make a difference there. And you had D. Milliner, another one of those great Jets draft picks. He was one of those players who was indeed so bad that when he was cut, he never got another contract. So the offset didn't make a difference because nobody wanted him, so the Jets didn't collect any money back on the contract. So about 1.4% of contracts matter. So in the grand scheme of things, the Jets are fighting over about a 1.5% chance. It's probably less than that because the kid's a quarterback. A 1.5% chance that they might be able to recover up to $1.05 million. You realize how silly that is? How ridiculous that is? That's essentially, about a $10,000 to $15,000 expected return. So you're here being dragged through the media because you can't get your quarterback into camp. You have no other option but to go and bring in Josh Johnson for a visit. No disrespect to Josh Johnson. He's had a nice enough career as kind of a backup spot starter type. And it's all for your expected recovery, your expected value on that's probably 10, 15 grand. That's it. You know what? Work on holding off a couple bucks in that signing bonus. You'll make that very quickly in interest, if you want to come to a compromise. And, it's kind of bad. If the Jets had done this weeks ago, nobody would have cared. Now it's one of those things where you dig your heels in because everybody is going to be talking about it. But the fact is, the Jets have just bungled this whole thing. And, you need some type of alignment between everyone. And when you have what your general manager clearly set out to do here and your head coach with drafting of this player and the way that you structured the team all around the fact that you were going to put him on the field because you wanted him out there to be the new face of the Jets, new face of the franchise, new beginning for everyone, deal with the growing pains this year and get that done, get that out of the way, that you are wasting your time fighting over that number. That is insanity. You spent all these months talking about, Wilson, scouting him, planning for him, thinking that this is the guy that's going to lead you to a Super Bowl. And you're worried about this. You're worried about the chance that he is so bad that you have to cut him and he's basically worth the minimum to another team. Like, he's so bad you can't even trade him. He's so much worse than Sam Darnold. You know what? All the guys dealing with these numbers, the guys who made the decision to draft him, the guy who's coaching him, they're all going to be fired because a new group will be in here because your quarterback busted. So why are you caring about this when you will not even be here to deal with it? You will be gone. If he stinks so bad, if he's so bad after this, that you have to get rid of him, you think you're going to be here this year to get that big $1 million credit? Okay, well, there's a precedent of it. Okay. The Titans use this structure with Marcus Mariota. The offsets on this, no offsets on this. The Bears did it with Mitchell Trubisky. The Titans did, in fact, draft players after Marcus Mariota. Do you know how many of the players they drafted got no offsets in their contract? 0. Didn't make a difference. Do you know how many players the Bears drafted that got no offsets in their contract? 1. Justin Fields, another quarterback. When you do contracts with quarterbacks, all it does is set precedent for drafting the next quarterback. It doesn't do anything for any other position, and you can cry until you're blue in the face and say otherwise. It is not true. You can do whatever you want for a quarterback. So there is no precedent to really deal with here. Now you get into this where your heels are dug in, and someone's going to look bad at the end of the day. No matter what compromise they do, someone's going to look bad. And you had an opportunity to start off on a good footing with your young quarterback. And, if things go well, this will be kind of water under the bridge until you get to your next negotiation, because they're going to remember this and they're going to think one way or the other that, they can either push you around in a negotiation if your quarterback is great, or, they're just going to be annoyed with you and say, well, we can't do a deal with you because you're just not being fair. That right now, I think, is the feeling from a lot of people about the Jets front office. I think after the Marcus May situation, I think that's definitely the case. But, there's time for that kind of stuff to change. The thing with this is the leverage is all with Zach Wilson right now. And, again, you can say, well, Trey Lance didn't get offsets. Trey Lance has offsets, I mean. Sure. But, the 49ers at least have a veteran quarterback on their roster. Now, I don't think he's any good, but he did go to a Super Bowl. They can at least claim that he's going to start this year, which pins Trey Lance to the bench. Okay, it's your rookie year, not a big deal. But if Garoppolo does have a successful season, that can pin Lance to the bench 2 years. Then you get into trouble. Do you think Jordan Love is happy in Green Bay right now where he might be pinned to the bench for 2 or 3 years? Probably not. But the Jets don't have that luxury because the Jets don't have another quarterback on the roster. There is nobody that you can even pretend is a viable alternative to Zach Wilson. This number right here, this $35.15 million, is the same amount of money that he's going to get whether he signs today or whether he signs August 31st, September 5th, whatever it is. Even if he signs in the season, the only thing he misses out on is a portion of his paragraph 5 salary. That number, this $22.924 million, which makes up the majority of his salary, remains the same. So he's going to get paid no matter what. The longer this drags on, the worse it looks for the Jets. If for some reason Zach Wilson wasn't to sign until the middle of the regular season, it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things for him. His career is based on what he does here. What you do in 2022 and 2023 makes you either be very wealthy or makes you be looked at as a bust. A couple guys fall somewhere in between, but it's what you do these 2 years. It's not what you do this year. It doesn't matter if he's good. It doesn't matter if he's bad. Look, RG3 was great as a rookie. It didn't mean anything. Jameis Winston had a fun rookie season. Didn't mean anything. What you do as a rookie doesn't matter if you don't play well after that. What you do these 2 years opens yourself up for a new contract. And these are the years that also coincide with when the Jets have all the salary cap money to spend to build a good team around the kid and hopefully get to the next level. And you want to be in a position where you're giving him a big contract. You don't want to be in a position where you're fighting with him about a contract in 2025 or 2026. You should be happy to do a deal with him, the way the Chiefs were with Mahomes. Now, that's a great deal for Kansas City, even though it's $45 million a year. More than happy to do it. You should be thrilled if you get a quarterback. What have the Jets gone through? Darnold, McCown, Geno Smith, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Mark Sanchez. McElroy, I think, had a start somewhere in there. You know, Tebow was on the team. Favre was here for a year. Pennington before that. Jay Fiedler took a couple snaps. Quincy Carter had a couple snaps. Vinny Testaverde, obviously. Now, I mean, it's not a good history. You want to get everything off to a good start, not be worrying about this. And this goes for really every single team in the league. But when you do this for a quarterback, it's just absurd. You're never going to cut him. You're never going to not be able to trade him. So what are you fighting over? That's why it makes no sense at all. You know, with the other positions, all right, you know what? You can deal with it if the players aren't there. If you really want to dig in on, you know, if this would have been Quinnen Williams when he was drafted, if you really want to dig in on that, okay, it's not a big deal. How do you think it looks for you as a business if you have Josh Johnson as your starter in week 1? Not because of injury, you just have him as your starter. Do you think that's good for the New York Jets organization? Do you think that's going to make the Jets money? Probably make more money on, well, maybe not more money than the entire offset, but you'll make money just on Zach Wilson jersey sales if he's there for the first home game. You know, versus Josh Johnson. You think the Josh Johnson is going to be a big seller that day? So it's like at some point in time, Joe Douglas has got to stand up and say, this is what we need for the team. Who cares about the precedent for a quarterback? Who cares about the offset on this? This is the guy. This kid is the guy. This isn't like dealing with the contracts 11 years ago. This isn't where you're dealing with what would be the equivalent today of probably $100 million in guarantees and a $30 million a year salary before he ever took the field. It's not that. You're talking about a kid who's going to make what? $8.8 million a year? Yeah, $8.79 million a year in a league where the top quarterbacks makes 45. Number 2 makes 40. Kirk Cousins makes what, 33? 35? 33, I think. And you're worried about collecting $1 million back potentially 4 years from now when you have one of the greatest benefits that you can have as an organization, which is a quarterback with potential who doesn't even make $10 million a year. And instead of getting him into camp, instead of getting him on the field, making him the centerpiece of your team, you have to sit here and defend the fact that you need to protect your precedents when it comes to offsets in a contract that don't mean anything. When people say the same old Jets, this is why they say the same old Jets. Because this is what happens. This is what they do. There's no thought of the big picture. There's no alignment between what the coach needs to be successful, what the general manager needs to put out a good message, what the team needs to get to these 2022 and 2023 years with the most information possible so they can build the best group of players around Zach Wilson and maybe get back to the playoffs after a decade of just doom and gloom. So, it's a mess if you're a Jets fan right now. Hopefully they get this done right away. Hopefully by the time you watch this video, it's finished. But it's a bit of a mess. So anyway, that's the end of that little bit of a rant here on the Jets and these offsets. But hopefully you learned a little bit on the salary offset part, and that it won't be as confusing from this point forward. So everyone have a great week, and I'll talk to you all again sometime soon.